system of government characterised by extreme dictatorship.
7 across.
Hag.
I beg your pardon?
Evil old woman considered frightful or ugly. It's 12 down.
Fascist!
Hag.
Now, as someone who lives near permanently under a rock, I just saw a year-old video from a big channel called Jenni about how to write quotable dialogue in stories. It's a really good, concise video that uses the example of Pirates of the Caribbean to set out how repetition in dialogue can be used to really make it stand out.
Parley!
Parley.
Parley!
Parley.
Parley!
Parley.
Parley!
Parley.
A shortcut to writing dialogue that is quotable is having the characters themselves treat the dialogue as quotable.
The fact the characters within the story are quoting each other or quoting certain lines therefore makes those lines stand out as more iconic and more quotable for the audience to enjoy.
The code is more what you'd call guidelines than actual rules.
Hang the code and hang the rules! They're more like guidelines anyway.
Barbossa tells Elizabeth the Pirate's Code is more like a set of guidelines, so Elizabeth later uses that guidelines argument to try and convince Jack's crew to help her. If we hadn't had the earlier quote about guidelines, this second time would have felt much more flat and maybe a bit contrived. It's not just an argument she's happening to come out with, it's something she's learned and taken from a different character. Plus, repeated lines are just fun. I agree with all of this, although I'd use Hot Fuzz personally as the best example movie. That film is absolutely chock full of repeated lines and phrases that develop to such an extent that they become like running jokes. You're there when the first line is used, therefore you feel involved in the joke when it then keeps cropping up a second or third time in a different scene. And what embeds this in the film particularly powerfully is that we have character reasons for them to be quoting so much. Hot Fuzz uses the character of Danny Butterman, someone who on the one hand quotes Nicholas Angel because he partly idolises and wants to be like him, but gets the context wrong.
Well, we can't accept gifts from somebody we've officially rebuked, so...
Yeah, we can't accept gifts from someone we've officially rebuked, so, jog on.
Mr. Skinner, what you do with your land is of no concern of mine, so... jog on.
But also quotes action movies and wants to be like an action movie cop, to the extent they end up even talking about lines they should have used during big moments.
He's in the freezer. Just say cool off. No, I didn't say anything, actually. It's a shame. There was a bit earlier on that you missed when I distracted him with the cuddly monkey, and then I said playtime's over, and I hit him with the peace lily. You're off the chain!
You know, this is an aspect of his character that is really fun in the movie, and quoting earlier lines of dialogue is a good way to express it. But I just wanted to make this short video basically to take it all a step further, because I don't think it's just about repeating and quoting in-story dialogue in order to have fun. I think, for one, it also creates something of a unique world to get lost in, where all of these characters have something close to their own shared idioms and phrases that make the language of this story feel different to the ordinary world or to other stories. Sometimes you can go too far with this, like I once criticised the show Ted Lasso for the way absolutely everyone is constantly talking about movies, everybody is a film buff. I find it really one note, but equally it does make the world of that show stand out as its own thing. Mainly though, this is about creating meaning. The reason Elizabeth Swann ends up quoting Captain Barbossa isn't just because it's fun, it's a means to show the audience how Elizabeth has grown and changed as a person, how this daughter of a governor has become both a little more pirate-like and also more fluid and adaptable than rules often dictate. It's a very concise, clear way to highlight a character's journey. That's why it works so well. If the repeated line wasn't highlighting some kind of change or growth within the story, it would feel more flat. And parallels like this are used all of the time, not just in dialogue. I talked about them a lot in my videos on Spirited Away. Chihiro has a scene where she has to cross this platform and make a scary journey down these terrifying steps. She's afraid and resistant and only plunges forwards at full speed when a step breaks. But later in the film, she's faced with a similarly scary pathway, but this time she takes a breath to compose herself, remembers that going quickly serves better, and so she runs. Chihiro hero has grown in confidence, not just literally at crossing obstacles, but this is a metaphor for her growing courage as a whole. It all creates the feeling of a cycle, coming back to something a character was faced with earlier, but responding in a different way. And I think the other classic example of this is returning to old locations. A lot of stories are book-ended by this. Fight Club begins and ends at the top of this skyscraper because it creates the feeling of a conclusion, back to where we began, but in a different light. Toy Story begins with Andy's birthday and all the toys being terrified about being replaced. The story ends with Andy at Christmas, and all the toys are now less afraid. Alternatively, you can show how the location itself has changed to highlight the effects this story has had on the world. Like the kind of classic spiritual quest where its completion serves to replenish an arid landscape. Star Wars: The Return of the Jedi pretty much ends with us cycling through all the locations and seeing people celebrating there now. What's that thing George Lucas always says though?
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme. Every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one.
Yeah. The rhymes can be a great method to express meaning in a very succinct way. Naturally, as the original video points out, doing this in dialogue too much won't be appropriate for all stories. If you're making a fun story that doesn't take itself too seriously, then it can work great. It doesn't exactly break the fourth wall, but I think this stuff can lightly tap against it, reminding you there was a script written here that the writers were having fun with. Feeling that sense of playfulness can be really effective, but in a different type of movie it could be distracting. Therefore, with a more serious film like The Godfather, these techniques are more subtle, such as the repeated use of oranges in the background, which I suppose is basically a motif here. Well, in that sense actually, leitmotifs in a film score can do all of this really effectively. You know, certain melodies cropping up again in a new context or a new light to express change. That's often very subtle, and you're allowed to be very subtle with this stuff. People might not always consciously notice it, but to loosely paraphrase Hayao Miyazaki, they'll understand it deep down, they'll feel it, even if they don't consciously notice. So yeah, if you want the audience to feel something has developed in your story, apply these techniques. This is just something I had on my mind after I made one big video and whilst I'm working on another big video, so I hope you enjoyed it, and now let me talk about something else.
And Sergeant Popwell was an exceptional officer, truly exceptional, and he had one thing you haven't got.
What's that, sir?
A great big
World Anvil subscription.
Come on, let's have a mosey around.
World Anvil. Yep, they sponsored this video, they're still here, hopefully they'll stay here. World Anvil is an online tool for building worlds, creating characters, designing and managing campaigns for a whole slew of games. Sleuth isn't the right word, I don't know why I said that. Look, you can do all that, you can plan and write stories, you can do all sorts of different stuff for creative projects. I use it for the world building of my novel because my old system of massive Word documents became far too chaotic. Not only does the ability to create timelines with hyperlinks branching off to specific characters or articles or a billion other things, not only does that make it so much easier to quickly find the information I need, it also makes it so much easier to plan things out and kind of keep going. Sometimes a blank Word document for world building is very daunting, so having all sorts of tools to help with visualization, to help you figure out what needs planning next, to keep your brain fizzing and unimpeded, because all of the tools are very straightforward and easy to use. That's really important to me. It's like the sharper an artist's pencils, the freer they are to focus on the art. World Anvil is a very sharp pencil. You can create mind maps, you can rearrange elements of your story, do all sorts of campaign related things for that sleuth of games I mentioned. Yes, link in the description and as a pinned comment should you desire a 51% discount on all their subscriptions, or if you're not yet sure, then try out the free version for as long as you like. That's what I did at first, and now look where I am, shouting their name at you through a screen. And as ever, a special thank you goes to Flying Spider, Grace, Kellyanne Davidson, Luke Orr, Michael Gallagher, Chad Bramwell and Joshua C. Follier. Thank you.